maybe set some context and get started. All right. So welcome everyone. This afternoon we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the use of IoT and public frequencies. Think about some different applications of that, and also talk about the proposed frequency change and the vote around that and what it means to us. So thanks for joining this afternoon. We're going to go quickly around the room and have people just introduce themselves and say a little bit about what it is that they do in this space. And then we're going to have some open discussion. There's obviously a lot of views and a lot of different impacts to be discussed here. So we're going to try and explore that as broadly as possible. So I'm going to go maybe, Leo, can I ask you just to introduce yourself briefly and say a little bit about what you do in this space?
Yeah, my name's Leo Guggle. I work in this space as part of my day job. I run a small company that rolls out LoRaWAN or IoT sensors for the last about 6 or 7 years in predominantly regional Australia. So our focus is in ag tech and regional applications. And in my volunteering work, I am the chairperson of the Growing Data Foundation. And obviously we do a lot of work in open data and advocacy for public data, public networks, and hence our interest in the frequency discussions.
Great, thank you, Leo. Can I maybe hand over to you, Nathan, to introduce yourself quickly and a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Hello all, my name's Nathan. I am an Australian Community IoT member based out of the Australian Capital Territory. I run a small company as well where I am implementing IoT services and devices, again, a little bit in the ag field of recent times, but also in smart logistics and also attempting to break into the local jurisdiction as far as smart cities, smart power goes. I've probably been on this journey now for about 2.5, 3 years.
Thank you, Nathan. Wonderful. And over to you, Julian.
Yeah, hi, my name's Julian, obviously, and my involvement is more on the hobby level at this stage. I had planned to do a lot more investment into the Helium infrastructure going back 18 months when this whole sort of frequency debate started, and due to some concerns in the way that was being handled, I sort of held off and ended up diverting those funds elsewhere. But I'm still, involved with the gateways and starting to delve into looking at sensors and sensor applications. But hopefully, if we can get the infrastructure back on track, it'll be more viable to get more heavily involved again.
Great, thanks, Jules. And last but not least, across the pond over to Mark.
Yeah, g'day. My day job, I'm in management and corporate tech, software as a service products. As far as Helium or IoT is concerned, I run a small fleet of geographically, let's say, well deployed hotspots, quality setups, so somewhat of a keen enthusiast, just that they rely on greater coverage and distances because I'm kind of based in a town south of Auckland called Pukekohe. So yeah, here to represent New Zealand and everything that's sort of going on in this space. I do a lot of mapping around as an enthusiast there, and definitely a supporter of what the AU guys have been trying to do, and the approach that they've kind of taken to sort of get a bit of attention and things, right a few wrongs, and try and get things back up and running for their country. But a lot of what they're pushing for and advocating for is highly relevant over here in New Zealand as well. So yeah, super keen to get our transmit power back, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. But in terms of future, I'm also really keen to get commercially into the IoT space, particularly around agri-tech as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. And it's actually a really good segue, I guess, to start with. It'd be great to talk about maybe some examples, some specific examples of how you use the technology, and maybe if you can bring into that a little bit about the impacts of the frequency change, so where you've been impacted and what that impact has been, both positive and negative, and just some practical examples that we can bind this around. I'm not going to pick on anyone, so whoever would like to go first.
Look, I might just use a practical example here. I mean, we work with the South Australian government here in making some of the fruit fly bins, which are dispersed across a very wide area. Frank is probably very familiar with that. So we have had one of our trial bins that is 27 kilometers from the nearest gateway, and we've had no problems with working all of this with AO 915. The timing of this changeover was extremely bad for us. We nearly lost the contract because of it. So we basically had to go and switch over to another network that continues on AO 915. So that's sort of the impact for us. And obviously we have the same impact as everybody else in terms of proof of coverage and everything else. It's not for us the driving force. For us, the driving force is really connecting a very wide region. And I think that's fairly typical of Australia. I mean, we have obviously got 5 major cities. I hope I've included all of them. Where really most of the country is having to fight with very large distances, both in driving and everything else. So the transmission power for us has been huge. The other impact for us is obviously we as and I'm talking we as the Growing Data Foundation, we obviously support a number of projects across the public LoRaWAN ecosystem, for example, on TTN and other things. So what that change has meant, obviously, that there's no compatibility between those. So we've got a large number of groups across South Australia at the moment doing things like public air quality monitoring. So that's another one of those impacts. So really, it's A, the transmission power for us, and B, that we are no longer part of a larger public ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Leo. Do we have maybe some other examples that we could share?
Sure, it's Nathan here. So I've just recently come back from a proof of concept deployment into a greenhouse farm up on the far New South Wales borderline there with Queensland. In there, what is apparent with any deployment is that you want reliability and availability. Your sensors need to connect, they need to stay connected, they're going to be deployed for years at a time. And for me, one of the detriments to having to be in a situation where we flip-flop between frequency plans is once you change the frequency, that's another logistics call, another risk assessment as to the time benefit, whether you move, adjust the sensors or move to a new network that supports. For me, again, although I am a proponent, so I'll declare that up front for AU 915. For me, getting a sensor that it works out of the box, so I don't have to do much configuration time, saving me on the time pressure, which costs money to deploy, and it works straight away. That's the benefit. And again, a slight nuance here too is that in that particular region within New South Wales, there is a government initiative which is actually throwing $35 million into standing up smart farming and smart agriculture. So, proof of concepts come along, we prove them out, farmers and agriculturalists see the results. Well, we hope we can turn the IoT into actually delivering results to the farmer in the end. And there are opportunities now for one-for-one buying of sensors, capability, etc.
Fantastic. So there's been a few points made already about the actual capabilities in the different frequency ranges, and also just the practicalities of when there's a change of how that impacts on your processes, and and potentially the costs and the quality impacts on what you're doing, and also of projects that might be underway that might now need to rethink how they're going to deploy some of these technologies. Maybe can we add maybe a couple more? I don't know whether Jules, do you have an example you'd like to share?
Yeah, look, my I guess take on this is a little bit different in that I was kind of more focused, especially early on in the governance side of things, and just the way that things were that was kind of the warning flags for me. I was very new into Helium and just looking at deploying some fairly significant capital into investing in the network, and the kind of red flags I saw were surrounding the whole HIP 45 process and the way this was tried to ram through back going up more than 18 months ago now. So that kind of is what paused me spending any more capital on the project. So that's kind of been where I've tackled it from. But and I'm one of the authors of the HIP that's currently being going through the temperature check along with Leo and Nathan. But part of what I've done and what we've all done is talk to a lot of experts from the LoRa Alliance to all sorts of other experts. My technical knowledge is nowhere near what some of the people in the groups are. So look, I rely on experts to give me that sort of background, and talking to business owners and hearing the impacts they've had where they've lost contracts, and as Leo said, he almost lost one himself. And lost business because of the change that was just forced on them out of the blue. So that's kind of my main focus is the business. I run IT businesses myself, so I know the sort of processes that should be followed and the kind of problems you can run into, especially when you've got investors who have bought products that under certain promises and that kind of thing. It's very dangerous, and that affects us all.
Yeah, there's some really interesting points there, both the investors and their expectations, what they've bought into the actually relying on the expertise that informs things, and also the governance process and how cohesive that is in terms of making changes and getting the right inputs. Thank you, Jules. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, just to reiterate with another example, I guess, of the transmit power and the proof of coverage aspect of this. I know that it's often kind of shot down as being short-sighted and a bit naive in the greater context of the network, and I appreciate that argument fully. But representing the hotspot owners, like a lot of us got into this because of cryptocurrency. A lot of us got into this, as by association through technology. But for us here in New Zealand and Australia, of course, when we're covering larger distances, to suddenly not be able to reach as many of these hotspots, it's been a great impact. And I'm paying my hosts. Everybody that is not on my roof, I'm having to pay for, and just to simplify things, I'm paying them a flat fee. Maybe that's just a bad business decision, but by me. But I've actually got a screenshot here which I am able to share. So if it'll work. No, it's not letting me on Mac OS. Sorry, but yeah, basically I've been dead in the water. So as I said before, I'm sitting in this rural area down south of Auckland, where I used to be able to see and speak to all of the hotspots up in central Auckland, and now I'm just talking to the 2 or 3 that are speckled around me. So I've been waiting patiently. I know that on dual plan and potentially AS on the other one, 923. We can in theory have higher transmit power, but in the 6 months that's gone by since they took it away from us, it hasn't been able to be rolled out yet, and I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs. So it's been a very frustrating time.
So great, with all of those examples, I think we've touched on a whole bunch of different examples that some are about the processes, some are actually about the technology, some are just about actual practical business impacts of making changes. I'm wondering whether I can open it up and I guess to note that there's going to be different views here, and there's going to be different perspectives, and we're likely to miss some as well. We're likely not to have everything there, but it'd be great to just kind of explore a little bit about the dual plan and the impacts of that, to just understand how those frequency plans interact, and you know, for example, why we couldn't continue to use some of the frequencies. So why have you had to make changes that have affected you, and so forth. So I might just open it up for a little bit of discussion, because I think it'll probably tic-tac best across the various examples that you're aware of, to just explore the dual plans and what the impacts are of those.
I might just sort of take a little step back in the history of the whole process on how we actually got to that plan as well. So I think, as it was mentioned before, Australia started, or Helium started in Australia on the AU 915 FSB2 frequency subband 2, and had a fairly stable run, which is also worth pointing out, the frequency band that is used for all other public LoRaWAN networks in Australia. So in roughly a year ago, we had this town hall, and I'm sure you remember, Frank, you were facilitating some of those meetings at the time, where we basically came to an agreement to have this dual plan that was proposed by the Helium Foundation at the time. It was basically, the promise was that we could use our existing devices on AU 915, and it also would work with AS923, which is obviously the frequency band that has got the lesser transmission power and used in surrounding countries in Asia. So that basically then fizzed out, and we were trying to follow up for about 6 months with the foundation as to what was happening. And then in August last year, we sort of, very late August, I believe it was, we found out that what we're going to get is actually a dual plan that does not support the previous network sensors deployed. So we had to move the sensors on on AU 915 from the frequency subband 2 to 6. Now that is, there's a technical reason for that, because obviously AS923 only has 2 joint channels, and they overlap with the AU 915 band 6, which we knew, but the advice that we have received in the past is that it from a AU 915 channel set is probably the worst channel of the lot. So basically what happened in on the 17th of November last year, correct me if I'm wrong there, guys, the foundation decided to basically switch Australia to this new dual plan. It caused a chain hold. We had a week of outages and data not running and all sorts of shenanigans. And I think we've sort of been suffering various degrees of pain ever since. So what turns out in theory to be a nice sounding idea, that you can actually support 2 different worlds, in practice unfortunately has turned out to be the worst of both. So really what we are saying is now we have to move back to what we had before, which was a stable network, and the AS923 support. We have had consultations with a lot of people in terms both locally and overseas. The advice is that AS923 support can still be done, but it has to be done properly, and it has to be done with different hardware.
Great. Does anyone want to build on that?
Yeah, look, I guess Leo's pretty much summed it up, but I think one of the issues is that this is a kind of a hack. It's not a recognised frequency plan, and every time Helium's done a rollout, like just one day they tried to roll out some new changes to the network, it's caused issues. and that's likely to continue. That's one of the reasons we're trying to get this done before the Helium, the Solana transition, because quite likely we're going to have more downtime yet again. So look, it's important that this gets fixed, and like Leo said, we've talked to numerous experts, including the LoRa Alliance, and they've made it clear this is not the way to introduce 923 support. There are ways to do it, but it's all hardware based. So we were all for having 923 support. We don't believe the demand is there currently, but it certainly can arise. And my argument to some of the people who are saying that if we go to 915, we'll never have 923 support. If the demand is there, the solution will be presented. It's going to cost money. It's going to be either going to 16-channel gateways and gradually rolling them out, or having some gateways able to choose to go to 923. But if the incentive is there, if demand is there, there'll be incentive there, and there's no reason from any business sense that it can't be done.
And so, interesting point there. You were also saying that whilst we're staying on this current configuration, the impacts, it wasn't a one-off impact from the change. It's essentially any time there's a configuration or an upgrade change that's made, that those impacts are felt again by the users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, it's just the scaremongering that they've sort of launched into this. This will mean we'll never get 923 and all sort of stuff. It's ridiculous. It's not a valid argument whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Any other points?
So it's Nathan here. I'll come at it from a non-technical perspective. So the IoT landscape or ecosystem is made up of more than just the technical aspects as well. So you've got your manufacturer supply chain. We're a small market as far as sensor goes and gateways go. So we are led by the greater markets in Europe and in the US. Our out-of-the-box experience for AU915 is that quite a few of these sensors come configured for subband 2. Makes for an easy deployment under the AU915. Does make it a risk trade-off decision as far as how much time you want to spend reconfiguring for the dual plan. And of course, we've only been operating this dual plan with some sensor deployments only for the last 6 months. So from a reliability, stability perspective, from a sensor perspective, jury's out whether or not it remains stable. So you will take a risk of the unknown going forward. And knowing my IoT community members that have been in this space for multi-years now, if there's one thing that makes them nervous, and that is the unknowns. But then I'll also come back to what my colleagues have spoken about the reliability of a network. Yes, network stability makes for easy IoT expansion and IoT coverage growth. Continual outages and using and implementing I'll call it unique, although some people don't like the use of that term, an innovative approach that the Helium network came up with as far as the dual plan goes. Well, unfortunately, the experience in the last 6 months, for me anyway, has been subpar. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Ultimately, that's whatever the technical reasons are behind it, from a deployment perspective, there are real impacts that everyone's feeling, and on a continual basis as well. We haven't heard from you, Mark. Have you got anything to say on that point?
Nothing to add on that.
Okay, thank you. So maybe in terms of the practical aspects of, we've touched on it a little bit in terms of why do we need to be compliant, and why do we need to build our systems in this way? I guess why is this fight worthwhile for us to have? Why is it worthwhile taking a position on this?
For me, it's the people who have invested in the project. I mean, like I said, in the HIP, we've got a couple of examples of just two of the businesses that we got feedback from. That they've come in good faith and invested in building the project, which was advertised as the People's Project, etc. And they're obviously very, got a very big grievance, which we're trying to work with them on and try to come up with a solution for them without having to do something that's going to cause everyone to lose out. They've lost out. So that's kind of the biggest thing for me. I mean, the talk of 923 roaming has been the excuse for this, but we've been hearing that for 2 years. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that the 923 use cases are only in 3 cities in limited areas. So there's no reason we can't cover that if those particular operators wanted to come over to us. But the other thing that hasn't really been covered is we're supposedly hearing again that there's these existing 923 sensors that want to come to us. Now, if they're on the current only 923 operator and want to come to us, they're currently in the best use case scenario for 923 in a city that's got a good coverage. If they're not happy with the coverage, that tells you something about the 923 coverage as well. If they think they're going to be able to roam on Helium, using 923, they're sadly mistaken. I mean, the Helium coverage maps that are currently existing are all based on the old 915 coverage. Even if they finally do manage to increase the power, it's still not going to affect the 923 sensors that are built there for the Asian market for 16 dBm. They're still going to have the join accept issues. So I think this is really a road to disaster if we try going down this road of promising things that can't be provided. And honestly, if they're bringing in new sensors, to bring in new sensors on 923 is just craziness. When the total infrastructure out there for 915 outside of those 3 cities, not just on Helium, they can roam onto TTN and all the rest of it as well. So they've got a lot more opportunity for tracking use cases, etc., on 915 than they ever will with 923.
So it sounds like it's not just in sort of country New Zealand, but even in more built-up areas in Australia around cities that the network has become fragmented through the change, and so it's kind of really reduced the way that it could be used. And is it right that you're sort of saying that there's not really immediately a way forward to just continue with new sensors in the 923 to resolve that problem?
Well, it's a lot of it's conjecture because we don't get any information on these people. That it's always this mysterious company that we can't get any information for. We could never get the information. The person who made the call to switch us without consultation, we've never found out who that was. They won't own up as far as we're trying to just not to lay blame. We want to talk to them and say talk about the decision making process and work through it with them, but they're kind of in the shadows, and that's what we found with this whole thing. And now we're being told again that there's this company that no one can reveal who it is, who has existing sensors that want to move over to Helium for some reason. It's all just very, obviously we've lost a lot of trust with what's going on, but it doesn't help when you get that sort of
Sorry, if I may to jump in on that particular use case. I mean, these stories floating around in that sector are really fairyland. You're not going to roam from US 915 via EU 868 and then the various flavors. I mean, people put AS923 into one basket. We have already got 4 flavors of AS923. Helium has just added 2 that no other network, they added 4, of which only 2 will be used going forward. So really, the whole roaming and tracking, international tracking aspects are fairyland, really. The only way you will ever solve international roaming is by sensors that can detect where they are and use the frequency that is legal in that country. So the other things in terms of these roaming arguments, we obviously and Frank was part of the process anyway. Had this town hall process where we were promised 100 times increases in data. Now we're 6 months down the track and we have a loss of 1/3 of all the data. So the data has actually decreased. So really that whole part doesn't add up. The second thing, which is sort of related to this, is and came up before, is this governance procedure. So we had effectively a switch without any governance process because they actually ditched the process entirely and just arbitrarily implemented this so-called dual plan. And now when the community, the affected community in Australia wants to switch back, we basically have every rock possible thrown into the way of this, and you have all of these people vested interest from overseas come in. So we the reason why we're doing this call obviously right now is there is a current vote that is not a vote. It's called a temperature check ongoing. But the surprising result is that all of these, or not surprising to us, obviously, that the community in Australia is pretty much behind the switch back to ANOMA 5, and there's a lot of overseas interests at the moment, from what we can see from Great Britain, that basically is trying to influence the vote the other way.
So I think Nathan's got something to say on that.
I just wanted to add, so you asked originally there, Frank, why is it worth fighting for? One thing I think is misinterpreted, because we are Australians, I guess, and we're pretty direct and frank with our language. We're fighting because we actually believe in this network as well. And in doing so, though, we want to do it properly. The community has great experience, particularly in the AU 915 field, where smart cities, smart power, smart mining, smart agriculture, smart farming, even into education as well. Yet we're going to fight like heck to get what we in the Australian community, from our experience, believe is the right choice and takes us on a pathway forward.
Yeah, fantastic, and it's a great leeway as well, because we've surfaced some of the challenges that we see in terms of where we are at the moment. The temperature check is in play now, and I guess it'd be great for us to just think about, in terms of the future, what are the options? Where do we see this going? What's the positive outcome that we're shifting towards?
Well, I guess if I'm reading your question correctly, the agreement we have with the foundation is that once this temperature check is completed, it runs for 7 days. It only started yesterday, so we're currently at a 97%, just over now, 97% for vote by hotspots, by Australian hotspots. So look, the commitment was that once it's complete, they'll dissect the votes and look at where they came from, which we're doing as well in the meantime. And the indication was if we have a good turnout in a positive response from the Australian community, they would look at rolling it back. So that's where we're hoping that it will end up.
In terms of where we're heading, obviously what we are hoping is return back to a stable network that people can rely on, that people can trust, and that is part of the overall public LoRaWAN ecosystem in Australia. So that's to me the ultimate aim, and I completely agree with Nathan. We would not be doing this if we wouldn't be passionate about this whole technology, the network, and we probably deserve a way forward that is stable, like it should be, and it is in other countries.
Fantastic, thank you. And so, look, I'm just going to open it up. Is there anything else that you want to say or add to this discussion that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
So from me, and just again, coming back to what's in the future, as IoT gateway operators, we're only one part of the ecosystem for IoT, so there's manufacturers, the network operator. And there's also the LoRa Alliance. So, they have looked at this problem of the dual plan in our region and have actually stood up a task force to look at how to incrementally harmonise these two channel plans over time. this community is actively looking to assisting with that particular aspect as well. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is we're just one part of the cog, but a very important cog for our local region, because we understand the region that we're in and how IoT is working or not working today. We are not poo-pooing any of the two-channel plans. We can see the benefits of both, but for this particular network, because we're constrained by only 8-channel gateways, we're a strong proponent of the stability that was prior to the change in November last year.
Fantastic, wonderful, great comments there, Nathan.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'll add is the amount of desperation that's been shown in trying to prevent the Australian public or the Australian investors in Helium to have their say it has been fairly much astounding. There's obviously a number of people there with their own little benefits that they gain from the dual plan and that kind of thing, or they think they might gain. I think a lot of it's been sales pitches that have been made over the last 2 years that we've heard repeatedly that just get repeated again and people believe them. But there's been a very concerted effort to try and get outside votes to vote against Australia. And like we've got Mark here, our friend from New Zealand, and I wouldn't dream of telling the New Zealanders which way they should vote. That's their call, and I certainly hear from a lot of New Zealanders that are very much against the dual plan, but I've heard from some that are for it. And look, I wouldn't presume to tell them which way to go. They've got a slightly different system to us, as far as a slightly different situation to us, but they're obviously suffering from this dual plan as well. But if they choose to use the results of this poll and work on their own proposal, whether it's for 923 or 915 or whatever it is, I fully support that, but I won't be interfering in any way, that's for sure.
Thanks, Jules. All right, any other final closing comments?
Look, I think to me, just final, if you want to sum everything up, what I would actually plead is that the Helium Foundation actually comes to the table and works with the Australian community. I mean, what has happened is they have fought the Australian community every step of the way to this. That is the point that we are sort of scratching our heads here and cannot understand why an organization will effectively sideline all of their community here and implement something that obviously wasn't wanted, and now we have the same problems moving back. Having said that, I would like to acknowledge and thank both CEOs of Nova Labs. Amir actually finally picked up the phone, and we had a good call. Amir is now actually in support of the rollback, and also by the CEO of the Helium Foundation. Without the lead of those two CEOs, we probably wouldn't even have this temperature check. So I would like to say thank you to both of these guys, because that has actually enabled this to go ahead. Yeah,
absolutely, and I'll second that. I think by the HIP kind of enabled that conversation to start happening, and we've had some really good conversations with the CEO of the foundation. But it just seems that every time we reach an agreement, there's certain forces within the foundation that jump in afterwards and start changing that and causing more issues. So hopefully we can continue the positive engagement with. Look, we'd like to positively engage with the whole foundation. If people have a penchant for 923, we'd like to implement that in the way that the LoRa Alliance recommends and do it properly. But working against your community is not going to be a successful outcome.
Yeah, I was going to say before, just to segue off Jules, we all just want a network that works. This is probably what brings us all together. And Without listing them all here right now, we've kind of been dragged through the mud a lot. Myself and hotspot owners and providers, particularly in the last 6 months with the loss of transmission power. But as these guys have kind of articulated, it's gone on much longer than that, and happened at a lot of the levels of governance that should have been a lot more clean and open and transparent. So it has been very challenging to get to this point. And people are saying, well, why not roll forward? Why do we want to roll back now? It's like, where I come from, my day job, you go hours with a failed implementation, and you roll back. You don't drag it out for 6 months. So we're ready to kind of restart things and take stock and move forward again.
Fantastic, great. Thank you for all those comments. So, and thanks for the great discussion, a very constructive discussion. Hopefully there was some information in there that'll help others who are thinking about the vote or who are wanting to understand the issue to have a little bit more context. And hopefully they'll take advantage of the temperature check to have their voice so that we can move in the right direction. Thanks, everyone.
Remember, AU stands for Australia. That's all you need to know.
Perfect.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.